plenty of other images I could have put on there.
Right. Did you know from the beginning that you were like, we're going to put Pyramid Head front and center?
No, that's marketing stuff. I make the movie and then you hand it over and you say, okay, well, how do you want to sell it to the people? And different countries will take different images because it will resonate differently for them. So obviously the US decided that Pyramid was the way to go, and that's what you get. And I think partly, it's the big standee that they put in the theatres has got that kind of 3D element because the light comes off the poster. And it's cool. I'll put one in my office.
Does he have a big role in the movie though? Is he going to be...
I can't give you too much away. Does Pyramid appear in the movie? Yes. Does he have a reason to be there? Yes. I got to ask you guys, how much do you know about Silent Hill? Are you fans or?
Yes.
So do you know you play the games?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Silent Hill 3 this is based off of, right?
Yes, it is. So the notion is, of course, that the monsters in Silent Hill have some psychological resonance with the characters. Right? Now, one of the big things. Kevin Smith making a lot of fucking noise next door. Jesus Christ.
It's like the weirdest place to be doing.
He really should have some respect for other people doing the interviews. But I did like his audiobook. The notion that the monsters have some psychological relevance and resonance for the character, and everybody complains that Pyramid belongs in Game 2, which is where he came from. Right, now, of course, he appeared in movie 1, so I can't say he doesn't exist anymore. I can't just not have this incredibly iconic monster who looks fantastic, and he's the equivalent of Pinhead. He's our poster boy. So I had to make sure that for me he made sense to the narrative of the story. So to me, in the games and in the mythology, he was an executioner who belonged in Silent Hill, and that's what he did, and he's a corrupt version of that. And I thought, okay, well, that's fine. I can use that. But what he also represents to me is masculinity. And the movie is really about Heather's search for her father. The first movie was about the parent's search for the daughter. Now this is the child's search for the parent. And you'll have to. I don't want to give away what Pyramid is, but Pyramid is not what you expect him to be. You definitely think he's a bad guy, but whether he really is, and whether he belongs in kind of Dark Alessa's army, or he's part of the pure evil of the Order and those kind of things, these are questions you're going to have answered if you care to have them answered. Right? If you're a Silent Hill devotee and you want to pull it apart, it's there to be done, and I welcome you to do it. If you just want a cool monster, that's what he's there for as well. And that's the thing about Silent Hill; it's got to operate on all these multiple levels. And if you don't serve that whole strata of the audience, you're not really doing it properly. And there's going to be an argument that I completely fuck it up and the movie's lousy, and some people will say that, but it should be there for people to want to explore. Thank you, Woody.
Did you shoot this specifically for 3D, thinking that you wanted it in 3D, or was that kind of...
No, it was shot 3D. Was word one, frame one, this movie was going to be a 3D movie. And, I came to the project a little bit leery about it, to be honest. Animation in 3D worked beautifully because it's bright and vibrant, and you can get and with animation because you can control the depth all the way. With this, it's a horror movie. It's got an environment called the dark world, for goodness sake. How the hell do you make dark and 3D work together? And that was a huge challenge. But it was shot in 3D. There's not a post-production 3D frame in this movie. There's two big cameras. We're doing great things with the cameras, and we're trying to make the movie feel as big and cinematic as possible, and at the same time create a world which is immersive and dark and intimidating. Now, what you can do with 3D on that is you can because we shoot it live 3D, right? So you have these big monitors on the set, and you can control the amount of 3D from moment to moment. It's almost like focus pulling. So it's a whole other camera department now. It's like the stereographer is a guy who sits next to you and controls 3D. So you can say, no, I want this to be really deep in this shot, or you bring the plane of focus, bring it more to the screen, or you bring it back out to the audience. So every step you can make those choices. So in a world of like Silent Hill, where you are creating a kind of purely fantastical universe, the 3D sort of plays quite nicely. And what it does do, of course, is you've got these big cameras, and it makes it much harder to do handheld, much harder to do Steadicam. So things which have become sort of the mainstay of horror filmmaking, can't use all the lenses because some lenses don't work with 3D quite so well. So there are a lot of barriers to making it work, but at the same time, what it did bring was a kind of new aesthetic and a new sensibility. My only problem is that a lot of the audience won't want to see it in 3D. They'll say, we're going to go see the 2D version. There is no 2D version of this movie, right? There'll be a 2D projection of it. They'll have flattened the 3D, and you can see it in 2D. But that's not the movie I made. I made it in 3D. I framed it for 3D. I cut it for 3D, right? Now, if you see it in 2D, you're not seeing the movie I made. Right? You may not like it in 3D, but that's the one that I did. And any 2D version is just a poor copy of the 3D version.
Why were they so dead set on 3D from the get-go?
You'd have to ask them.
Find out. Oh, go ahead.
Following up on the 3D, normally 3D is used in a lot of gimmicky aspects, while Silent Hill is mainly known for its psychological horror instead of its jump out in the face.
Yeah. No, I'd say this movie is very much more about the psychological, atmospheric, draw you in step by step as you follow Heather, played by Adelaide Clemens, into the world step by step. You're being drawn in. Now, am I going to tell you that I don't use 3D in a few gimmicky ways every so often? No, absolutely not. Yes, I have shit coming out of the screen at you. But it wasn't the primary motive. The primary motive and the reason why I made my peace with doing 3D and enjoying the experience was because I wanted to draw you into that world. So that's absolutely the purpose of it for me.
Tell us about practical versus CG effects in the film. I noticed there's a lot of practical in it.
Yeah.
And is that important to you in making this film?
I'd always go with practical effects over digital effects if I can. Clearly there are shots and monsters and creatures and things that you can't do practically without making massive builds or having a huge amount of time on the set. Now this was a decent budget, but a modest budget by modern movie standards. But more than anything, I like to make monsters. Paul Jones has worked with me on other movies and did the first Silent Hill, and Patrick Totopoulos, who I've worked with before. This is what we do: we make monsters. We draw them, and they go to a workshop, and they cast some poor guy, and they put him in, and they cut. It's fantastic, So, and then having that creature step onto the set, which you've lit, and there's the atmosphere there, and you've got an actor who can respond in a genuinely real way. I'm sure you guys spoke to Adelaide, and she'll talk about saying, when Red Pyramid steps on the set, you get this 8-foot tall thing with a huge bloody axe behind him, dragging this thing along. Even though it's a guy you've just been having tea with in the green room, when he puts Pyramid on, and he's a fantastic performer, that becomes a little bit more real and a little bit easier to work with. And me, I'd always do monsters, men in suits any day. But there's also a place where digital enhancement helps, because you also want to be able to say to the audience, this isn't quite real. This can't be a guy in a suit because he does this, this, and this. And there's only one pure digital creature in the movie, this thing called the mannequin monster, which is this kind of multiple spider leg thing made up of shop dummies, or actually humans who've been turned into shop dummies, who've then been ripped apart and put into this creature. And though we experimented with practical ways of doing it with rod puppets and things like that, it was never going to work the way I wanted to do it. So Mannequin Monster is a digital creation, but everything else is almost fully practical.
Aside from the monsters, the Silent Hill video game series is very much defined by its environment and atmosphere, and you have certain levels like the hospital or the apartment. So how does that come into play in the movie?
Well, when I was writing this, obviously I knew that I was adapting Game 3, making a sequel to movie 1 and making a standalone movie by itself. So those three things came into play. Once I knew that the narrative thrust was basically going to be taken from Game 3, you look at those environments and say what we want to play with. Now, Lakeside Amusement Park for me was a key place. The carousel is a key set. Heather's battle with Dark Alessa is a key moment in them, because it's a character beginning to understand who she is and whether she can have dominance over this dark part of her personality. So that's what we do. So the environments they're sort of a given in many ways, because the game dictates where you want to go. Now, the game gives you a lot more places to play than the movie, so I had to make the choices. And I wanted to go back to the hospital because I like the nurses and they were fun and everybody enjoys those. And then it had a narrative reason for it. The Insane Asylum had a narrative reason for it, because that's where Leonard is. And part of her journey takes her to Leonard, and we see the human personification of Leonard, whereas in the game you only ever see the monster version. You hear his voice, but you don't see the real guy. I thought, well, nobody better to play Leonard than Malcolm McDowell. So we get a great scene with Malcolm in human form, and then you have the monstrous version. The fun thing for me is sort of building those sets and kind of stepping into Silent Hill. The weird thing for me was when we did the fog world of Silent Hill. Now all the fog is digital, and the ash is digital. So what essentially we're doing, we're stepping into, we dressed the sort of near ground with ash, with the fallen ash, but we went to a kind of suburb outside of Toronto, a kind of derelict type place. But there's still cars in the background, there's people going shopping in the deep background, and everyone's saying, how's this going to work? Don't worry, you're never going to see them. And of course, that atmosphere completely closes in, and you don't. And then I know when I'm watching a fog show, going, yeah, there's people going shopping in the background of the shot. But for us, as the audience, you're in Silent Hill.
Now,
So I'm making a really good one.
now what chose you?
Oh, that's no good. Do another one.
Now, what brought you to use Silent Hill 3 over Silent Hill 2 story or any of the other games? Is it because it was a direct sequel to the adventures of what happened in the first
Yes,
Silent
the
Hill?
reason why Silent Hill 3 was chosen, and there's some who say it's not the best game. I think generally speaking, 2 is considered the best game. Go along with
I
that.
like 3.
Yeah, okay, well, I mean, that's a toss of a coin, I think. But for me, 3 worked because it was a continuation of that story. I wanted to know what happened to Cheryl from the game, but Sharon from the movie. If she grew up, what happened to her? She becomes Heather. How did she become Heather? Well, I explain that in the movie. And so that narrative cohesion and the continuation of the story made a lot of sense to me. Is there a case to be made for making other Silent Hill movies out of the other games? Yeah, but there's a much better case to be made now for making original stories about Silent Hill. The games are the games, let them carry on doing their own thing, and Downpour was fun and the prison thing is fun. But if I want to go back to Silent Hill and make another movie, I'm going to write my original story and just use that universe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, but now you get to the star of the movie. I'll just move on. Nobody says about Akira Yamaoka. I'm really surprised.